Hello, hello. It is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop, and thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And just recently, I got a platinum record in the mail. This is the first time that I've ever gotten a platinum record in the mail for a record that I did mastering on. I have been working in audio professionally for about 20 years, and I have never gotten a platinum record until now. So I want to do a live stream about it and see if I can give you some insights into what I think I've done right to finally get this achievement, which to me is kind of mind-blowing because I never thought I would get one of these. And also why it took me so long, why it took me 20 years to actually get a platinum record. Because there are so many people who would put this, fairly significant accomplishment, I feel like, absolutely to shame. And we're also going to talk a little bit in today's episode about comparing yourself to others and why you probably shouldn't do it most of the time, and how to do that in ways that are healthy if you have to, and how to do it in ways that are extremely unhealthy. And also, we're talking a little bit about sharing good news with people, because I share the good news I was so excited when I opened this up. I had my wife take a picture of me, and I shared it with some friends, and overall, I got all these, texts and calls back saying, "Oh, Justin, that's so great." And I got at least one where it's like, "Why do you even share this with me? You're a jerk for sharing this with me." So that happened to me today too, just before this live stream. So I thought that was really interesting. And we can talk about that kind of stuff because I also know what it feels like in my life to either feel resentful or annoyed by other people's achievements, and why that's probably not a good or healthy thing for your own soul and brain to do. But we'll also talk about whether I am in fact a humble bragging jerk, which I might be. This whole entire podcast episode today might just be me being a human being and being a humble bragging jerk. But I really do feel like, it's not every day I get one of these. It's kind of cool. What does it mean to get a platinum record? And I want to see if I could take some lessons out of it and share some of those lessons with you. Some of you people listening might have like multi-platinum records and are looking down your nose at me and saying, "Oh, welcome to the club. Finally, Justin, took you long enough. You have one of those now." And then there's a ton of you, probably more of you, because I know how few platinum records there are in the world relative to people making music, who might say, "Oh, that's awesome. I would never expect to get one of those." And to be honest, I never expected to get one of these. It was never on my bucket list of things to do. But really, I want to tell you what it means to me personally. And what it means to me personally is that I did a good enough job at my job of mastering a record that I didn't totally destroy it and make it so that people would immediately turn it off. Like, my mastering work didn't stop millions of people from hearing this song and hearing this record. So I'm at least capable of not completely destroying a record if somebody gives it to me to master. And here's the thing, with music, it's so important sometimes to get a little bit of this external proof, because if you've ever worked on records, whether as an artist, as a musician, as a producer, as an engineer, you probably are familiar with the weird cycles of self-doubt that we all face somewhat constantly, or at least somewhat regularly. I mean, it happens to me today, where I've been mastering records. I'd say for the past 10 years, I've been focusing on mastering. Before that, I focused more on recording and mixing and even live sound. And even after mastering for 10 years, and I've had gold records before this, and now this is my first platinum one. Even now, knowing this record went platinum, months ago, and finally getting it now, I still master records today and it'd be like, "Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Clearly, I'm not very good at this. I can't get this to work." And then you eventually have a breakthrough, or you do the thing that you probably need to do, which is take an ear break and come back to it, and things work out, or they work out to the best of your ability. But it is good sometimes to have things like this so you can say to yourself, "Okay, I'm objectively, extrinsically, I'm not so terrible at my job. These people didn't make a mistake by hiring me. I'm okay enough at it." Now, hopefully you can feel that way long, long before you get a platinum record. But we'll talk about my long journey and finally getting there, and what I would recommend to you if you someday want to get there yourself, and how you can probably do it possibly more quickly than I did. Best practices for musicians, producers, engineers who really want their record to get heard by a significant number of people. Because this credit of a platinum record basically means that, at least here in the US, a record has been heard or bought The record has been bought 1 million times. But since I don't know if people really buy records so much anymore, they also do it by streaming numbers. So it means at least 150 million streams. And these have to be verified streams. And it's actually a fairly exacting process. And they wouldn't count streams worldwide because this record, for anyone who's curious and wants to look it up, it's a gorgeous sounding record. The artist and the producer did a great job on this. The reason it sounds good is much more to do with them than with me. But they wouldn't count any of the international streams for it. So I thought this thing would have went platinum a year or two ago. But RIAA, the Recording Industry of America Association or something, I probably just butchered that, they go through this fairly exacting process of validating the number of streams and the number of sales. And they're not quick to give these things away. But I've got to tell you, having this doesn't make me any better at my job. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I am a better mastering engineer than people who don't have one of those. Because like I didn't get better after I got this thing. I actually got good enough to do this quality of work quite a while ago. And it finally caught up with me because here's some of the dirty little secrets. The dirty little secret on this record that went platinum is that I actually mastered this record, I think in like 2017. So it took 7 or so years to go platinum. I think it took, I can't remember exactly, but I think it took something like 5 or 6 years to go gold and 7 or 8 years to go platinum. So that's another interesting thing about your career in music and as a musician is for the vast majority of us, it is not about having an instant success early in our 20s, right out of the gate, and then milking that for the rest of our lives, or in some cases, washing up and becoming drug-addled pop stars who spend the rest of their life deconstructing and demolishing themselves from the inside out. Right? For a lot of us, including this artist, Yoklor, great artist, listen to the song, Beige, it came out really well. It took him 7 years at least of plugging away, going out, touring, getting his song listed again and relisted on playlists, getting it placed in one film and getting it placed somewhere else. And there's this slow build of this song getting to the level of a platinum record. It wasn't out of the gate and just happened. And that's what most artists' careers look more like. Most artists' careers do not look like instant success. They look like a slow boiling pot that you keep on applying fire to. So that would be my big first lesson for musicians and artists who want to reach large audiences. Do not expect to do it quickly. Expect that it will take you years to build a large audience. Expect that you might be capable of making music that can really connect with people long before it actually connects with people. Just like I was capable of mastering a record that sounds good enough to go platinum long before it went platinum. In fact, in my career in audio, I've been working with platinum artists almost since the beginning, but never on a platinum release. How did that happen in my world? Well, very early on, I think the very first things I was getting paid to do would have been about the year 2001, 2002. I might have to double check. I graduated high school in the year 2000. I'm totally aging and dating myself here, which a lot of audio engineer influency people won't do. They don't want to let you know that they're actually like between 60 and 80 or something. I'm 43. That's kind of like old in the music world. I don't yet have to dye my sideburns. I don't think I'll ever. I think I'll let myself go gray. I think I'll pull an Andrew Sheps instead of a what's his name? Who's the guy who dyes his sideburns? You tell me in the comments down below. Big YouTuber who dyes his sideburns. That's totally me being persnickety, making fun of someone for dyeing their sideburns. There's so many things you can make fun of me for. I'm just being envious that there are people with bigger channels than me who have sideburns as good as mine, but they have to dye theirs and I don't. It's like the one thing I have going for me is that they're not yet fully gray. But there's more salt and pepper in here as time goes by. Man, huge tangent, but hopefully that's what you tune in to the SonicScoop podcast for. Because if you don't like digressions, you should be listening to something else. Regardless, back on track. I've been working since early on with artists who were big, making records back in 2001, 2002. But most of my most meaningful work was never with artists that were big. All the work I did with artists that were big was really small work. So, for instance, I worked as a mixing assistant for a Willie Nelson record and Wynton Marsalis record, relatively young, in my early 20s. And finally, there was some artist that wasn't like an indie band. So if my mom or like someone's friend's mom asked me who they might know of, who I worked with, I could be like, oh yeah, I've worked with Wynton Marsalis and Willie Nelson. Although I didn't actually even meet either of those artists. I played a very relatively small role as a mix assistant on that record, but I could say, hey, you've heard of that. So I guess I've done something meaningful in your book. But honestly, most of the artists that I worked with in a meaningful way as a core producer, as a core engineer, were really small artists that I just liked. Often I just really liked their music, or I really liked them as people, and then we worked on music together. And that was a lot of the beginning of my career. Was just, I had something they called a Digi 002 back in the day, really small 8-channel portable interface. And I would go with that and a laptop to people's like rehearsal spaces and record them. And I would make money doing that kind of thing. And then I would be an assistant engineer or a main engineer on hip hop sessions for really small artists. But even then, there were some big artists I worked with. I remember I worked on what you would probably call a vanity project, where Jadakiss, he's a platinum artist, platinum rapper, was a guest on this track. And I'd love to be able to share that release with you. This track where I engineered Jadakiss's vocal relatively early on. I must have been 22 or 23 years old. And I think I was getting paid $15 an hour to do it, being like the chief engineer in actually a nice but weird studio in New York. And I was being paid like 15, maybe I was being paid $20 or $25 for the Jadakiss session. I can't remember for sure. The studio rate was much higher than my rate. This was back in, 2002, 2003. But I wish I could tell you where to find that record, but I don't think I can. I don't think you can find it anywhere, because it was basically a vanity project for a female rapper. I believe her name was AK, and I believe she was being bankrolled by her husband or boyfriend, who basically paid for Jadakiss to come and guest on her release. But it was such a formative experience for me, because I remember after being in the studio for so long, working on so many hip hop records, recording so many vocals, and mixing so many small hip hop projects, that Jadakiss came to the studio, spat on the mic, and was like, oh, that sounds like a record, because he's good. He's actually good at being a rapper. And I mean, like actually, like genuinely good. And the kind of charisma he had in front of the mic. The fact that you didn't have to ask yourself, am I using the right mic on this guy? No, he just sounds interesting. And that experience happened to me again and again when I would work with some of these really big artists. I remember working with Magnetic Fields. The singer from that band, I was doing a live sound recording session. So I was mixing live to the radio, a radio station called WFMU, where I did some engineering. He was doing a performance on WFMU, the guy from Magnetic Fields. I can't remember his name. If you want to put it into the chat, put it into the comments, remind me his name and let me know. Relatively, big kind of famous indie artist. He did that song, "I'm the luckiest guy on the Lower East Side." I can't sing as deep as him. He has an extremely deep but nerdy voice. And I remember thinking, what mic am I going to put on this guy? Like, the Magnetic Fields voice is like such a iconic voice. Like, how do I make sure I'm doing it justice? And I set up like 3 or 4 different mics. And the first one that he sang into, I was like, oh, it just sounds like the guy from the Magnetic Fields when he sings, I don't have to do anything. It just sounds interesting already. Just don't mess it up. So the biggest thing that I can say about working on a release that gets heard by, at least 150 million people in the US is that it was already good when it got to me. Like, the artist was good. the producer was good, the songwriting was good, the production was really good, the mix was really good already. And although I mastered, and I think I did a good job in mastering, and I think I really changed the sound of it in mastering in an extremely positive way that the producer and the artist were super excited and happy about. And I really do think I added something to the record, and I think it sounded slightly different having me do it than someone else. But by the same token, if they had everything else go right for them and some other really decent mastering engineer mastered it, it probably would have also still gone platinum. It was not me that did that. Big shout out to Ariel Lowe, the person who produced it and mixed it, and the artist, because they are so much bigger in this. And that's something that I think you have to recognize. I believe, I don't want to get into too much drama here, but I believe that the artist and the producer mixer had a bit of a falling out over time. And this happens often in musical relationships where two people sometimes really want to take credit for who is the most important in the record and who really made it happen. And two people can both feel underappreciated and underrecognized for their contributions and feel like they really did the most meaningful thing in it. And they can both possibly be right. Like, even if you take people who did something meaningful on a record, records are almost always, to at least some degree, a collaborative process. There is this myth of the lone genius. Now, there are occasionally records that you hear about where someone recorded themselves alone in a cabin somewhere and the record went, platinum or multi-platinum. And that does happen. But even in those records, there's aspects of collaborative process that we don't necessarily hear about. Sometimes people helping those artists curate the songs that are going to be released, or helping those artists develop in certain ways before they do the recording, or the people who are not really talked about much, but help them mix or master it and then kind of get second billing or no billing at all, because we want to perpetuate this marketing myth of them having really done it totally by themselves. The examples you can find when there really is a lone genius operating by themselves, like completely by themselves in a vacuum, are so small. They're trotted out as stories because of how unique they are and how unusual they are. And even in those rare cases where they're true, they're usually at least somewhat less true than we're led to believe for marketing reasons. And that leads me to big thing number 2 about really getting your music heard. And that is that marketing is important. It is not necessarily the only or the most important thing, but it is important and it cannot be neglected. So, this record, again, Beige by Yoklor, I think there's a reason it got, it was probably up to 200 million streams or something now. It was 150 million ages ago, and now it's probably, I don't know what it's hit if you look at worldwide streams now, but there's a reason it got that many listens. And there's 2 things. One, it's actually an emotionally compelling song for people who like this kind of music. It might not be your cup of tea. You might listen to this song and say, that's not my thing. It's like this indie pop. It's this kind of super romantic, heartfelt thing with kind of weird instrumentation. It's like banjos and synthesizers and a kind of high, unusual approach to vocal performance. But you cannot deny that there are millions of people who emotionally resonated with this song and wanted to hear it again and again. So it had to have that. But also that's not enough. Because I have worked with many artists who I like as much as Yoklor or more, and I've worked on many songs I think are as compelling as this song that do not have platinum accreditation, that have not been streamed 150 and 200 million times. There are some records that I've worked on that I think sound gorgeous, and this record, Beige, this track by Yoklor, it's a gorgeous sounding track. Ariel did a beautiful job producing and mixing it, and I really like the mastering I did on it. If I can play you one of these days the before and after mastering, I'm excited by the changes that I did. And I really genuinely like it. But that said, there are a bunch of records that I worked on where I say to myself, this is absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait until a bunch of people hear this record. And then not a lot of people do. So as much as I think it's neat and it's cool and it's fun and I'm going to hang it on my wall, mostly as just a credibility thing to have back there, it's nice to have a gold record back there and a silver YouTube button and a platinum record. But these are not success themselves. They're mere trappings of success. And the success, I think, ultimately comes from making a piece of art that resonates with some human beings when they hear it, or has the potential to resonate with human beings when they hear it in the right way. I mean, that is ultimately the success of music. What are we doing with music? With music, it is our job to communicate emotion to others. I think that is the primary thing about music. It is a form of communication. And what do we communicate with music? Yes, there can be message songs that convey to people like your political ideology, which I think is honestly some of the most boring and lame music when it's like specifically overtly political. I can't stand music like that. It's not like you should never be political, but it's like, use another format. I don't want to be propagandized while I'm listening to a record. Really, the unique thing that music can communicate to us, it is not like how to do algebra. That's not the unique thing that music can do. Although you can have songs that teach people geography or teach them math, right? You can do that with music. Sure. But what is music so specifically able to do? I think it's able to communicate to people immediately emotional states that they have no choice but feeling. That's number one. And number two, you can cause people to involuntarily move their bodies along with you. And when you succeed in doing that, when you really succeed, you get all the other things out of the way, and you succeed in conveying an emotional state so that someone else says, I know exactly what it feels like to feel that thing that you are feeling. That's what music does remarkably well. And when you can get people moving together and having fun, moving their bodies together and having fun being around each other, not doing much of anything at all, except for being around each other and taking in an aesthetic experience, that's what music can do. So when you succeed there, you succeed regardless of how many streams there are. Now, with that said, as an artist or as a producer, as an engineer, succeeding in making art may not be your only goal. One of my goals from early on, one of the reasons that I didn't work with a lot of big artists in the beginning is because I had additional goals when it came to music. My goal was not just to succeed at making some music that had the potential to connect with people and succeeding in that way, the way that anyone can potentially succeed. Some of my other personal goals were, one, I want to make an income off of doing music and audio stuff. This was for two reasons. One, fear and lack of confidence. True motivator. Fear. What was the fear? The fear was that I didn't actually have any other marketable skills, which was probably true. Like, I remember graduating high school and thinking, what am I going to do for a living? They taught me nothing in high school, which will earn me money. Like, how could I do the thing where you're supposed to, like, I think in the last generation, people would like turn 18 and they would get a job and then they would get their own place and they'd get married or something and they'd be able to live on their own. Like, how can I do that? Like, I have zero skills. I'm 18 years old with zero skills. I mean, I kind of know how to cook eggs, not that well. Maybe I could be a short order chef. But I could learn a lot of stuff about like musical equipment and audio devices because I was super interested in them. And I developed this skill of recording things and being the guy who understood how the console worked and then how the computer worked and all that stuff. And I was like, this is the only set of skills I have. I better double down and triple down on this hard because I don't have anything else. So I need to figure out how to make an income doing this because I don't have any other skills to make an income off of. Now, that was honestly probably pretty foolish. With better guidance, there's probably any number of things that I could have gotten decent enough skills at to make money doing, but I maybe didn't have that kind of guidance. And honestly, I think this is a good reason to do music for a living. One of the best reasons to do music for a living. If you want to know, should I do music for a living? The answer is probably no. The answer to why, yes, you should do music for a living is because you feel like you have no other choice. And I very much felt like I had no other choice. So that's one. And it changed a whole bunch of things profoundly about the way that I approached music production and my career path in audio. And I'll give you some ideas and insights there if you want to make a living doing audio and or music. And number two reason I was talking about was that insecurity. Well, that's two sides to that insecurity. One is that I felt like there was literally nothing else I could do to make money, but also it would show that I was actually good at this. That I wasn't just one of those people pretending that they did music production and audio engineering. If I could make a living doing it, then it would show that I was okay at it, because it's such a subjective field. Who's to say whose mix is better than another person's mix, right? If it's so subjective. What I've come to find out after a long time of doing this and coaching people is that, yes, there's an aspect of subjectivity to music production and audio engineering. Like, there's not one way that I could master a record and have it come out good, and three different people could master the same record and it could sound slightly different, but they could all be good. But there's also a whole bunch of ways which would be, I would say, objectively bad, like ways to master a record that just didn't work. And that it's not like just my taste that it doesn't work, like it just doesn't work, and you're going to make people empirically turn off the record and not listen to it. And you're mastering, or you're producing, or you're mixing, or you're recording could make people go, oh no, I can't keep listening to this. So I think you can be, there are ways to get things objectively wrong. And then there's a number of different ways to get things subjectively right. But I didn't realize that at this point. I thought you kind of could be good or bad, but there's so much subjectivity that's like, how do you really know if you're good or bad? Well, if I made money doing it, that would at least be a way of saying that I was good at it. And that's sometimes why people like things like this. A platinum record is like this extrinsic validation that you're okay. But honestly, I don't need it. One of the big reasons I think I've been able to stick with this for so long is that in absence of extrinsic validation, there is an intrinsic drive to just keep on working on the puzzle of music. And how do I make things sound good or interesting or pleasing to me? How do I do things that do that puzzle of making something that both sounds great to me and makes other people agree with me on that? And how do I keep on working on the puzzle of getting things to sound cooler and cooler? Because if I really needed extrinsic motivation to continue working on music, I would have stopped doing audio and music production ages ago. But this idea of wanting to make a living doing music may have even held me back on the path of going platinum sooner. What do I mean? Well, what I mean is that I remember graduating from college. By the way, I didn't go to college right out of high school. I just wanted to rock. So that's what I did for a year and a half. And then eventually I realized that everyone else who just wanted to rock was in college. So I went. So I graduated at a slightly older age than some people, by about a year and a half. And I remember graduating and sending out resumes to like every single studio in the New York City and like greater New York City area. I probably sent out 100 to 150 resumes. And I probably got, I don't know, 20 of them wrote back or so and said, would you like to, hey, looks great. Would you like to come work for us for free? And I said, I can't. How am I going to work for somebody for free? Like, I'm expected in my household to make a living. And if I ever want to get out of my house, I'm also going to need to make a living. How am I just going to sit around and work for free? That doesn't make any sense. And am I doing something that's actually valuable and meaningful if people want me to work for free? Like, I had this idea of don't work for free. My idea has changed on that somewhat. Somewhat. Not completely, but somewhat. And there's mistakes that I've made by not working for free. But in not working for free, I never had that ability to get into a really thriving studio where everybody wanted to be, that was working on really big records with really major releases and really major artists all the time. Because those were the kinds of ones who would say, yeah, of course, everyone wants a piece of this, come work for free. And I was like, no, I don't want to be part of that. So that kind of took me out of the pipeline of working with potentially early on multi-platinum artists in a significant way. And if I had gone that route, and I really was as talented or more talented than some of the other people doing that stuff, or as hardworking or more hardworking than a lot of the people doing that stuff, then maybe I could have been a person who worked on platinum releases at an age 10 or 20 years younger than I am today. Because that ends up being the story for some people in those situations. But guess what? It's not the story for most of them. In those systems, there's this churn, this kind of sink or swim churn about it. And ideally, I suppose you're filtered out quickly or not. And some small portion of people go on to doing significant things, maybe even at younger ages. That said, if you look at so many of your favorite, particularly on the audio side, the craft of being a mixing engineer or a mastering engineer or a person who records or a producer, a real producer who actually produces records and didn't just sell someone a beat, a lot of those people are older than you may expect. So even going down that path is not a guarantee that you're somehow at the top of your field in your 20s and 30s, which is actually very, very rare. And that's one of the reasons our society points out and lauds these people who have these amazing achievements in their 20s and 30s. And this is not to knock those people. It's just to acknowledge they are so rare, and we're so obsessed with them because they're so rare, that our brains get kind of twisted, and we start to expect that as being the baseline in our own lives. And if we start to compare ourselves to some 22-year-old phenom, Kurt Cobain was really famous when he was like 23 or 24, so what am I doing? Clearly, I have no business being in music. Man, a whole generation or two's minds were corrupted into thinking that that is normal or to be expected. That you should be, in the words of the script of Fight Club, you all expect to be rock stars and movie gods, right? No. So my big thing there is your basis of comparison. Would it be cool, like if I had the dream of working on a platinum record, and that was one of my big motivators, instead of my big motivator being, I want to work on music that I think is interesting with people who I think are cool and make a living doing it. That was my motivator. If instead my motivator was, I want to work on a bunch of platinum records and have that happen as early in my life as possible, my whole life trajectory would have looked entirely different. And honestly, probably would have been had to have been entirely different up until that point, up until the point that I made that decision. To a degree, you want to focus on, like, what are the metrics that are actually important for you to succeed on in your life? Because for me, the platinum record, this was never one of my metrics. It's cool that it happened, but never one of my metrics. And you know what's funny to me? There are some people I know who had gold and platinum records at a younger age than me who, didn't really ever make a sustainable income off of music. And many of them left music, even though they worked on bigger records than me, at a younger age than me, had many more streams and many more big credentials earlier on than I did. They chased that so much. And then at a certain age, they were like, oh crap, I have to get like a real job now. I'm either going to have to find a way to be a trophy husband, or I'm going to have to like get a job in finance or something and leave music completely so that I can make an actual income. Because yeah, maybe the gold and platinum records were impressing some people, but they aren't paying the bills and they're not allowing me to hold down a wife and a family. So then they either leave to get a real job so they can have the wife and the family, or there is some subset. This is more possible for artists than for producers and engineers, of becoming a trophy husband. I totally know some musicians who are now in their 50s and 60s, who are like famous in their 20s and 30s, but they never really made a good income, but they were in like some really hip esoteric band. And then I worked with them older on their lives, and they basically married like heiresses who wanted to have a cool husband. They became trophy husbands for a rich woman instead of getting a real job. That you kind of have to have already succeeded at being a cool artist. But here's the problem. Sometimes you succeed at being a cool artist. You're like a cult legend in your own subgenre, but you still don't have two nickels to rub together. And it's hard to have an adult life. So that's another thing to think about. Like, what are the things you're chasing? And you can have almost any reward that you want out of life if you are willing to pay the cost. You can have almost any reward that you want to out of life if you're willing to pay the cost. You've got to pay the price. I wanted to pay the price of, or I wanted the reward of, I'm making a living doing music and audio related stuff that could support me financially and a family, and doing it with music more often than not that I think is interesting and fun to work on, and working with people who I like and get along with, and am having fun collaborating with, and am enjoying the process of helping. One of the prices to that is that I'm much less likely to work on big multi-platinum releases and be super famous and be like the biggest mastering engineer in the world. I mean, I was looking at some statistics recently because I'm interested in statistics, and also because, everybody Googles themselves if they have any ambition whatsoever. And I was like, where do I stand in the world of mastering engineers? And I remember looking up some statistics on a credit site that put me in the top 1 or 2% of mastering engineers in the world by the records that I worked on. But then I look at all of my hero mastering engineers, my favorite mastering engineers who've done all of my favorite records. And these are people who are in the not top 1%, but the top 0.1% of mastering engineers. In some cases, the top 0.01%. Now, if that was a problem for me, if my goal was to be top 0.1% of mastering engineers and to be working on all of the biggest releases that come out every year, my life would look very different than it does today, most likely. So you have to think about what prices you're willing to pay. Like, I don't really want to be at the beck and call of people who have extremely tight turn times with extremely high expectations for me calling them back at 3 a.m. or something. I'm not saying that's how it works for all the best mastering engineers, but like, it has never been my goal to seek out and to see how I can get big artists to work with. It just hasn't been part of the price that I've been willing to pay. Who knows? I reserve the right to change my mind and have a new goal in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years from now and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool to be one of the most prominent mastering engineers in the world, instead of being in the top 1% or 2% of mastering engineers, to be in the top 0.1% or 0.01%. That's something that I could possibly focus on in my life, but I'm not going to focus on it now. Things are going really well. I got a daughter, and I got a family, and I have hobbies, and I like doing jiu-jitsu, and I like archery. Recently, I've been getting to sword fighting and chess, and I have things that I want to do. And I'm happy to continue I get to work on cool mastering projects. I'm just not pounding the doors of like the biggest labels and saying, how do I get to work on the next release by insert biggest top 40 artists in the world right now? Not something that's interesting to me, and not one of my measures of success. And for you, one of these doesn't have to be your measure of success in music. It's not my measure of success in music. It's neat. It's fun. When I got it, I shared the news with a bunch of people because I'm like, that's so cool. A platinum record. I've always seen those and heard of them. I've never had one. It's beautiful. It's actually plated with platinum. That's neat. Like, how could I know? A million copies sold of something that I worked on, or 150 million streams of it. That's neat. Like, I want to share the news with people. And most people who I share that with, most like friends and acquaintances, who I was like, oh, we know each other well enough that we text every once in a while. Here's a text. Hey, this is a picture of me with my platinum record I just got. Almost everybody wrote back and said, congrats. That's awesome. Because that's exactly what I would do if someone who I, text once every several months texted me like, hey, this neat thing just happened. And I like you enough that you were one of the people who came to mind who I wanted to show it to. I would be like, that's awesome. Congrats for you. But be careful with that, because apparently every once in a while, some people will be really annoyed at you for doing that. I want to say, I texted a whole bunch of, including some old musician friends who I thought I was close to back in the day, but didn't have a reason to talk to for a while. I'm like, oh, this is a reason for us to connect. One person I sent that to was like, basically, F you for sending that to me. What kind of narcissistic jerk are you that you would share this with me? And I just felt really bad that was his reaction. Maybe I am a narcissistic jerk. I mean, I've been talking for 41 minutes into a camera. Apparently, I think that I'm interesting enough to listen to that I should have the right to talk for 40 minutes and have people listen to me. The reason I do that, talk for 40 minutes, is because it's the kind of content that I like to consume. And enough of the kinds of people who I want to reach right into me to say, Justin, this is awesome. I wish you would have talked more. Because hopefully the thing that I'm doing here is I'm not just talking to myself. Like, I'm imagining you are there with me, and I'm trying to communicate things to you. I'm trying to communicate things to you that I wish that I had understood earlier, that I wish I had wrapped my mind around more easily and more quickly. Like, I'm trying to tell to you the things that I wish people would tell to me. But is there some narcissism that goes along with that? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Is every single person who is a public figure a narcissist? Maybe we're all narcissists. I think there's a clinical diagnosis of narcissism that has something to do with the clinical definition, meaning that you are not empathetic to others and you really actually don't care about other people's emotional state. I think that's what true narcissism is. And interestingly, actual true diagnosed narcissists are very likely to point other people out for being narcissists and calling them narcissists. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. I don't think my friend, or apparently former friend, who got mad at me for sharing my success with him is a narcissist. But I feel like he got hurt by someone else's success. And what I felt most bad about is I don't feel like I was wrong for reaching out and saying, oh man, this guy reached out to me last year. It was so long since I talked to him. Now here's an excuse for me to reach out back to him. Isn't this neat? Maybe we'll spark a conversation. We'll talk about more stuff. And he just thought that was me being a jerk, maybe rubbing something in his face or something like that, which is not my goal at all. And I immediately I felt bad about it because I've felt that emotional state in my life of seeing the success of someone else and having it grind at me and annoy me and make me angry. And I don't think that's a healthy way to live. I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong here and I shouldn't message to someone, hey, here's a milestone that I hit. Share in the joy of this milestone with me. Maybe there are times and places and people that you wouldn't send that to, because there's a whole bunch of people who I didn't send such a message to. But there are people one of my high school friends who I haven't talked to in a year. I sent, it's like, hey, I just got a platinum record. Hopefully that would be a fun thing for you to hear about. Like if you had some big success and you want to tell me about it, I'd be excited to hear about it too. But there are other cases where I wouldn't do that. So I think you do have to be careful about who you share your successes with, because there are contexts in which you could inadvertently hurt someone's feelings or make them feel like you're gloating or putting them down in some way, even if that's not your intent. And there are certain contexts in which it would be just inappropriate to do. And hopefully I walk that line properly, but that's a fairly subjective line. But I can just say that in my own experience, when I've felt angry or resentful about someone else's achievement, that's been on me. And I am not immune to it happening again in my life. There are totally times where I see someone doing something well or having some achievement, and my first instinct is, F that guy, right? It does happen. But the difference now that I'm at my age is I try to quickly recognize that that's actually not a problem with them, but a problem with me, usually most of the time. As long as that person isn't doing anything that's like actually materially hurtful or degrading to others around them or society as a large, as long as they're not like a bad influence on the world because they're putting toxicity into the universe, as long as that's not at issue and the issue is just, oh, they were successful, F that guy, then that's on me. And I'm not immune to getting that feeling. But hopefully, I've developed the skills and ability to go down that rabbit hole. That rabbit hole of envy and resentment and annoyance at other people's success. Because I'm capable of it. Well, that's about all I've got for today's podcast episode, but I want to let you know about some free stuff, and I want to ask about your thoughts on this stuff. Let me know in the comments down below when you think is appropriate and inappropriate to share your successes with others. Also, let me know what have been some achievements of yours that you've been super proud of. If they're way bigger or way smaller than this, or if they're way weird. Also, I want to let you know about the free stuff that I had mentioned. One, we're giving away one of these microphones. This is a JZ Amethyst. I have been talking to this microphone the whole podcast episode. I love this mic. It's my main mic that I use on videos. We're giving away one of these totally for free. Go to SonicScoop.com/contest. That's SonicScoop.com/contest to enter for your chance to win. Also, we're giving away free plugins. Soundtoys, longtime sponsor of this channel. This is not a enter to win kind of thing. It's everyone gets a free plugin. You get a free plugin, and you get a free plugin, and you get a free plugin. Everyone gets the new Soundtoys plugin, Space Blender, 100% for free. So check that out over at soundtoys.com. You can try out anything they make for free for 30 days, but if you act now, only until May 22nd, you will get this plugin for free permanently forever. But you have to act now because it will be only available for sale after May 22nd. Also, other free stuff. Our next giveaway is going to be with Point Blank Music School. They are a accredited educational facility of higher learning. Well, they teach you how to do audio and music production stuff, more betterer, more gooder. They have full courses on music production and audio engineering, and they really teach a lot of stuff that I don't teach, which is really the basics and fundamentals of audio. And they have some online courses that are be giving away a whole bunch of those for free. If you go to the SonicScoop.com/contest page, shortly after this, mic giveaway is going down today, and then we get to pick a winner. And then later today and tomorrow, we will start up with the Point Blank Music School giveaway. And there's a whole bunch of access to great courses on the fundamentals of audio and music production that you can get there at our giveaway at SonicScoop.com/contest. Again, let me know about some of your achievements, some of your goals, and some of your guidelines about when to share and when not to share your achievements and successes with others. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. See you next time.